Hi there, I'm Jim Zirin. Welcome back for more of our virtual conversations. Ray Kelly is with us. Ray Kelly was the longest serving police commissioner in the history of the city of New York. In my book, he was the greatest since Teddy Roosevelt. When he left office in 2013, he had a 75% approval rating, 63% among Black voters. With police brutality and police reform dominating the news these days, Ray is in a unique position to give us his take on exactly what is going on. We are delighted to welcome Ray Kelly back to the program.
Jim, great to be with you. Thanks for having me.
Okay, so we have Minneapolis, we have Atlanta. Ray, what went wrong?
Certainly Minneapolis event was horrendous. And as I said, it was the worst act of police brutality that I've ever seen because of its deliberate nature. And of course, we have Atlanta, which is a little bit more complex. Jim, you being a Supreme Court scholar, I'm sure you thought right away about Tennessee versus Garner and the implications of that Supreme Court decision on that case. Now, there's Monday morning quarterbacks on both sides of this issue. But at the very least, I think it should have taken a more deliberative process to go forward before a determination was made to charge the police officers.
Now you have, going back to Minneapolis, you have the officer with his knee on George Floyd's neck, and then you have the three other officers who kind of stood by and let it happen. And they're being charged as aiders and abettors. Is that unusual, or do you think that there's a basis for charging officers who stood by and did nothing?
You know, I think there's a basis for it, but you had one of the officers who was on the force or on patrol for 4 days. You had Officer Chauvin as the training officer. So he was the superior. So are these young rookies, or a couple of them rookies, going to intercede? Should they have? Yes. But as far as human nature is concerned, I think it would be probably somewhat unreasonable to expect people in that situation to intercede.
You know, there's a certain amount of hysteria associated, and justifiably associated, with both events. But do you think these other officers, the so-called aiders and abettors, are being victimized by the public outcry against the police as a result of these two incidents?
Well, this was such a terrible event, and the public outcry so strong, so genuine, that they were certainly caught up in it. I think they'll be going to trial, and I think some of the nuances of the case of this situation will be coming out. But clearly, Officer Chauvin should never have been a police officer. And one of the things that I've said in terms of change or reform, which is the magic word, reform, is to do a much better job of psychological testing candidates to be police officers. We're still using tests that were used many years ago. And I think we need to do a better job because it's such a demanding job. Now, police officers have to be aware of so many more things: court decision, technology. Obviously, the impact of the community is much stronger now than it's ever been. We have to do a better, we being the law enforcement community, have to do a better job at not hiring our problems. And I think that would be a true meaningful change or reform to take place.
Well, years ago, we had no body cameras worn by police officers, and we had no cell phones with cameras. And in both cases, there were civilian videotapes of what happened, and there were also police tapes of what happened. And the videotape evidence on the face of it seems to be pretty damning. Do you believe that this is playing a role in how the police behave?
There's no question that these cameras, both of them, which the police worn cameras and the public with everybody with a cell phone camera, has been a major game changer. And you would have thought that cops, for instance, Officer Chauvin, would have been much more sensitive to the fact that he's being filmed by a civilian who's asking him to get off of George Floyd's neck. I mean, the fact that he didn't respond, it's just, you can't explain it. So yes, cameras have made a major difference. I think what cameras worn on police officers do is make officers hesitate. In some people's minds, that's good. In some people's minds, that's not so good. But that's where we are. And monitoring of the police has now become, to a large extent, a function of the public with their cell phone cameras.
Do you believe that this public outcry as a result of these two incidents was justifiable, or was it an overreaction?
Well, I'm surprised at how quickly the demonstrations took place. They happened in all 50 states and foreign countries as well. So, I can't say it's overreaction because people were justifiably horrified at what they saw. Now, the actions of some of the protesters or rioters or looters is something else. The vast majority of protesters we know are peaceful. They wanted to voice their opinions and expressions. But then you saw many people, certainly here in New York, assaulting police officers. They used bricks, they used rocks, and tremendous taunting going on, putting a camera right in the face of a police officer. None of that, best of my knowledge, was written about, certainly not written about to any great extent. So I think that's what the police are concerned about and feel like they're not getting a fair shake. There was a lot of instigation, you might say, to get that prize picture of police officer overreacting. So look, cameras have changed the world. Police officers have to come to grips with it.
The right to protest and the freedom of assembly are rights protected by the Constitution. And police officers are supposed to play a role in protecting that right. So that becomes a very important challenge for police officers where the protest is against the police themselves.
There's no place that has more demonstrations than New York City. The fundamental job of the police department, well known by police officers and executives, that they have to protect the right of free speech. The demonstrations every day in New York City. And I would submit that the police department do a very good job in protecting the rights of protesters. What I'm talking about is the minority, a distinct minority, that are trying to goad the police into overreacting. And sometimes it works. The looting in New York City, I don't know what that had to do with the protests, but it was an embarrassment, quite frankly. And I think it's going to have a significant impact on businesses here in New York. People called me and they were shocked by the fact that the looting took place. It's such a wide area, Macy's and the stores in Soho. So I don't see that as a legitimate part of protesting, but I would submit that what the police do here in New York is an excellent job, generally speaking, of protecting the rights of protesters.
You go back with the NYPD for many years, and you policed the protests at the time of the Vietnam era, and which were quite specific in what the protesters wanted. They wanted to end the war and bring the boys home, and they thought that the war was wrong. But with those protests, anything in order of magnitude for what we've seen recently and what we're continuing to see?
Well, I think they were similar in number, the numbers of people that turned out, and I policed those demonstrations. I had been a Marine in Vietnam. I came back and policed the demonstrations when I came back to the police department. And they were large in number, similar to the protest turnout that we've seen just recently. But it did not have the level of violence that I've seen and the sort of taking police on directly. And, you know, that's what I have a problem with.
Now, we've had other incidents not dissimilar from this. We had the one in Ferguson, Missouri, In New York, you had the Staten Island chokehold on Eric Garner. Chokeholds are illegal under police department regulations. Garner was dismissed after a departmental trial. And there were some demonstrations. And it was another one of those I can't breathe cases. And the offense was relatively minor that he's being arrested for. But did you see the kinds of protests, the level of protests that we've seen as a result of the killing of George Floyd?
Well, the demonstrations in reaction to George Floyd's murder were much more strenuous and engaged the police all over the country. By the way, I banned the chokehold and the NYPD in 1993. You know, these events, I hate to say this, but we have 18,000 police agencies, well over 400,000 law enforcement officers in this country. There are going to be some events, regardless of how much you reform or how much you change things, that are going to be untoward. They're going to be bad. They're going to be bad shootings. It's just the nature of the business. It's human nature. There's never going to be a time when there's zero bad, problematic engagement between the police and the public. That is an unfortunate reality. But I must stress that these events are aberrations. These are not how police officers generally do their business. And that's one of the problems that I see coming from the George Floyd murder. People are going to think that, hey, this is the way police act all the time. They just don't have cameras to show that. Now we have a camera that shows that this is sort of normal practice for policing. And it is not. It is a very, very distinct minority of officers who would engage in that, or events that show that that type of sheer brutality.
Well, the charges goes beyond sheer brutality and goes beyond excessive force. The charge is that in our police departments all over the country, there is a systemic racism, and that what we see is a pattern and practice of violence by police against Blacks in disproportionate numbers to violence by police against whites. And I think what the Black community is saying is somehow or other they're afraid of the police. And that if they get stopped by a policeman for speeding, there's a possibility they'll be shot or wrestled to the ground and might be seriously injured. So do you believe there's systemic racism in our police departments in this country?
No, I don't. I don't believe it's systemic. I believe you can have officers who are biased, who are racist. I still think that's a small number, small minority, but I don't think it's ingrained in the system by any means. So much has been done to address the issue. People talk about reforms. Here in New York City, we have a minority police department. Every police officer on patrol is wearing a camera. There's the implicit bias training that goes on. And these are the types of things that are going on, you know, throughout the country. So I don't see it as a system problem. I see it as can be an individual problem. That's why I say we have to do a better job of screening who we hire to bring into this now very demanding profession.
Okay, so one of the reforms that's proposed is defunding the police. Mayor de Blasio thinks he knows what it means. He says he's going to reduce the police budget by $1 billion. And now if that happens, do you believe that that is going to reduce the safety of New Yorkers?
Oh, I definitely think it's going to reduce the safety of New Yorkers. It's a mindless reaction. It makes no sense. And as so many people have said, and I concur, who's it going to hurt? Not the individual police officers. Somehow people want revenge against the police who are going to defund them. It's going to hurt people who live in the poorest areas of the city. They need the police. The police do good work every day in those communities. They're saving lives. And the vast majority of people who live there know that. They may not love the police, but they want the police there. They like the police. So it's just a dumb idea. Mayor de Blasio hired 1,800 additional police officers above the Bloomberg number in 2015. Now he's talking about taking $1 billion away from the budget. that could translate into as many as a 5,000 police officer reduction, about a 16% reduction of the department. It makes no sense to me. And the notion is going to shift money to other parts of the, the city government. We've been doing health services, we've been doing youth services for many, many years. Probably no city does more than New York City to try to help communities come together to fight crime. So I think this would be an incredibly stupid move to reduce the police department, but I understand that's the woke train, that's where it's going, and certain mayors want to get on it. And I think we're going to be victims of that here in New York City.
Aren't there many functions that are performed by police officers that have nothing to do with law enforcement? They're really social services. I mean, getting a drunk off the street or getting a homeless person off the street. The delivering a baby, talking someone off a bridge. I mean, those could be done by healthcare professionals.
Almost all of those jobs just came to the police department because they either weren't being done or they were being done inadequately by other agencies. The police department is the agency of first resort and last resort. You have healthcare professionals respond with the police to deal with emotionally disturbed people. Sure, let's have that. And by the way, that's been tried many times in many places. School safety officers, they were put into the police department because discipline in the Department of Education, then Board of Education, was virtually non-existent. That's where the security force was. It was moved into the police department to make them more professional and also to give them some backup. The same thing with traffic enforcement agents. They do not want to leave the police department. I can tell you that. So it's not going to reduce the budget. These people are still going to be paid somehow by tax levy funds.
But there is a hue and cry throughout the country for some kind of police reform. And I think even you agree that there's a need now for reform. Maybe this highlights it, and maybe the need preceded George Floyd. What reforms would you advocate? What would you think would be most effective?
Well, I said we need a better job of hiring people and screening them when they come in. I would also advocate for the police chief or CEO, whoever's in charge of the department, to have more leeway to terminate problematic police officers. The patterns of abuse, either verbal or physical, start to develop pretty early in a police officer's career. But as a result of civil service rules and laws, as a result of very strong union pressure, it is virtually impossible to remove people in that category. I would like to see, for instance, the state legislature respond to that. It can be done, but it's got to be done only through legislation. Now, the database that's being talked about in both the Senate and the House bills and the president's executive order about for disciplinary records of police officers, that's fine. I don't think it's a bad idea. I don't think it's a big problem of officers who have a bad track record going from one department to the other. It can happen, but it really is. It doesn't happen that frequently because police departments are employers, and they do the things that employers do. They vet, incoming personnel. There's some of those things that have been around for a long time. They've all been put into the basket. I know something is going to emerge from Congress. The reconciliation process will be probably a very dynamic one, because the Senate bill and the House bill they agree on certain things. They agree on cameras. They agree on chokeholds.
Well, they don't quite agree on chokeholds. The House bill would outlaw chokeholds, and the Senate recommends discontinuance of chokeholds. And if they want to continue, they have to report back as to why they have them. So it's not
that's because of the limited powers that exist at the federal level. You just can't decree a lot of these things from the federal government. And what they do is use the leverage of federal funding to get police departments to comply. So it's just not a question. It might sound good in the media. It's just not a question of decreeing that that we're not going to have a chokehold. This is
But
really
should there be a national policy that chokeholds are outlawed when used by the
yes,
police?
I do, but you can envision a situation where a police officer is fighting for his or her life, and they may react in such a way that is a chokehold. And I think the president's executive order tries to leave that door open to a certain extent, which to me makes some sense. We want to outlaw them. We don't want them used. But hey, if it's a life or death situation, I think you have to take a look at it. There has to be some sort of body that looks at it and says, hey, under the circumstances, this was a reasonable reaction.
What about the provision of military weapons to the police nationally? Now, in New York, I know, because New York's a terrorist target. And when you were there on your watch, you bought a lot of military weaponry, military style weaponry, because it was necessary to fight terrorism. But in Oshkosh, there's no real terrorist threat, as we all know. I mean, should Oshkosh be provided by the federal government with grenades and grenade launchers and small tanks and drones, which is the case before Obama stopped it, and then Trump allowed it to continue?
Well, let me say this. We never used military weapons here in New York. I think what you're talking about is a totally different deal, federal funding to buy certain equipment. I've been against, I've said it many times, the actual deployment of military-style weapons in the streets of our cities. Very bad optics. We have civil policing. We don't have military policing. So the Humvees or the armored vehicles that are obviously military vehicles, I don't like them at all. We did not take them in New York when I was the commissioner. You're talking about something else. You're talking about counterterrorism funding. And they were never sent out or never made available by the federal government to fight terrorism. It's just that, hey, we have this stuff here. Can you folks use it?
There's also a bill that was just passed by the city council about surveillance, which would require the police department to reveal, I guess, on its website what surveillance tools they're using. Now, there are more cameras in London than there are in New York, and London is a much smaller city. But do you think it's a good idea to require the police to disclose what surveillance tools are using, how many cameras, and what the other implements are of surveillance?
Well, generally speaking, no. I don't think it does. You can perhaps let the city council know, but you'd like to think that they would keep it confidential.
Well,
So
you know
if
they
you're talking
won't.
about putting it on a website,
Right.
that's not good. That doesn't protect New Yorkers, and nobody with any common sense would say that it does.
What about the education of police officers, Ray? I think when you were there, you wanted to upgrade their education and really heading toward a situation where every police officer would have a college degree. And of course, you have many degrees yourself, undergraduate degrees and graduate degrees, including from Harvard. But do you think that's a good idea? Do you think that will upgrade the performance of the police?
I do. I've been preaching this for years, and I understand that it's a bit of a heavy lift because people think that if you require a 4-year baccalaureate degree, that it'll somehow adversely affect minority recruiting. We did studies that showed that was not the case, that actually in our police academy, minority recruits had a higher educational level than majority recruits. You'd have to do this incrementally. You have to do it over time. It's not the panacea. It's not going to change lots of things right away, but I think it would be important to get the highest quality individuals coming into policing. One of the indicators of quality is the fact that they obtain a 4-year bachelor's degree.
Would you like to see more diversity in the executive suite at the NYPD?
You know, it's pretty diverse now. NYPD is the most diverse police department probably in the world. There are police officers born in over 100 countries. And the Bloomberg administration, we were proud that it was accomplished on our watch. And of course, those people are rising to the top of the department. You know, it is a meritocracy. You do take tests. You do move up to the department. The executive corps is very diverse now. So I think it's an issue that the NYPD took on directly and has succeeded in.
So I have a question for you. If you could do anything in the nature of police reform, what would be at the top of your list?
Oh, that's a difficult question, but I would say recruitment. As I said before, doing a better job of analyzing, examining, and testing people who come into the profession. It is
Okay,
a complex business now. We need the very best that we can find.
Complex business, and we need better recruitment. Ray Kelly, thank you so much for coming by. This has been just marvelous. And thank you for coming by. Tune in next week for more conversations. They'll probably be virtual, but one of these days we'll be back in the studio. Take care, be well, be safe, and all the best.